It's time for the Rose Chat Podcast, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the world's most beloved flower, the rose. Join award-winning gardeners Chris VanCleave and Teresa Byington as they chat with rose lovers and experts from around the globe. With each episode, you'll gain valuable knowledge and insights to achieve the rose garden you've always dreamed of. Listen now as we explore the world of roses.
Hey friends, I'm so excited today to have with me my good friend David Zlesak to talk about a subject that many have questions about or are at least a bit confused about, and that's plant breeding and the history and the importance of plant patents. So David, welcome back to Rose Chat.
Thank you so much, Teresa.
It's so good to have you, but it's that time of year, winter. It's coming.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm feeling sad. The beautiful roses that we've been enjoying. The cold has shut down the plants, and I just finished tucking away the potted roses for winter this last weekend.
So you're up in Wisconsin. It's definitely going to get cold there. You know, we keep hearing a lot about the zones changing and that kind of thing. And mine did change a little bit, but it's not going to change so much up in Wisconsin that you're not going to be covering roses, I'm thinking.
Yeah, exactly. So I have so many potted roses, and even though they might be some hardy varieties if they were in the ground, because they're in a pot, that makes the roots a little bit more tender. Because when we have soil elevated in a container, it becomes the same temperature as the air. When they're planted in the ground, they have the buffer of the soil, and it just dips a little bit below freezing typically, even though the ground is solid. So protecting the potted roses up here is a big chore for gardeners that have roses in pots. So some people dig them into trenches, put them into insulated garages. I have thousands of roses, way too many. I lose track of how many. And so I've been using construction blankets. And that's really, been a game changer. So I put all the pots, pot on pot, together, just sitting on the soil. And then I make a comforter. So I put a tarp down first to protect the insulation blankets from the thorns. And then I have these concrete insulation blankets used in construction, high R values. They're lightweight, they're bulky, 6 by 25 feet, about an inch thick. And then I layer them over the tarp, and then I put an outer tarp over everything that covers the whole pile and weigh it down with concrete blocks around the edges. I use a little bit of rodent paint under there, and that's just been amazing. They come through perfectly, and I don't have all those leaves and other things to get rid of in the spring.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that, I can't imagine what a huge chore the leaves would have been.
Yeah, about a decade ago, I started doing it this way. I was inspired by Deb Kaiser up at the St. Cloud Garden up there at Virginia Clemens Rose Garden in St. Cloud, Minnesota. And she uses construction blankets actually over the beds of tender hybrid teas. And a lot of Rose Society members, especially as we're getting older, it's hard to winterize all our tender beloved roses. So a lot of Rose Society members are using these blankets not only for their pots, but growing their tender roses in a confined bed and then covering it over with these blankets.
Wow. I mean, that would work. That would probably work here if you had things in containers. I don't. I have had in the past, but, I just brought them into the garage and that kind of thing. But boy, if you had a lot, that would be such an easier fix for that. People do try to bury them and all kinds of things, but I can see the benefit of that for sure, even on a small scale.
It's great. Yeah, it allowed me to expand beyond what I should.
You did say thousands, didn't you?
I did. I keep propagating oodles by cuttings and having more for research projects, new seedlings, parents that I cross on to. So it's been wonderful.
And we appreciate what you do because it brings us so many beautiful roses. It brings us so. And let's talk about roses. Let's talk about plant breeding and patents. And I think you're the perfect person to talk about this, as your breeding program has brought so many beautiful roses. Things like Petite Pink, Easy Peasy, the Sweet Pretty Polly series, the Magnificent Above and Beyond, which I just cannot wait to see it bloom again in my garden. And that's just naming a few. I mean, do you know how many, you don't know how many roses you have, but do you know how many patents you have?
Altogether, it's mainly roses, a few other plants like ninebarks and heliopsis. There's 16 altogether, and one that'll be published really soon to make it 17.
Oh man, well done. Bravo, bravo. Thank you so much for your hard work. So I think this is a subject that many people are either they're in the dark about or they're confused about. So Professor, take us back in time and give us a history lesson on plant patents. How did it all get started?
Oh, my pleasure. So in the United States, patent laws went into effect, many, many decades ago to help innovators be able to incentivize their efforts and resources being devoted towards innovation. And for design patents, there's different categories of patents. People that come up with something innovative, unique, were able to describe that particular innovation and apply for a patent. So they describe it as fully as possible, what makes it unique, different, what are the unique claims or qualities that make their innovation different than what has been done before. And then if approved, that allows that person, the inventor, and or the company that they work for that the inventor assigns the patent to have control over who accesses and is able to utilize that innovation for a period of time. So during that period of time that the innovator has control over the use of that innovation, they typically want others to use it, and they want to license it and have others benefit. And as part of that, typically there's some sort of royalty that's part of it. So whoever's utilizing it has an agreed upon amount of money or royalty, so many cents per individual copy or unit of that innovation that goes out. So then the inventor is able to recoup some of the costs that went into developing that innovation, and then be able to continue to build their capacity to innovate more. So ultimately, the goal is that it'll spur on more than enough innovation to more than cover the costs that people are paying to utilize these innovations, and it would help spur on the economy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. These things take time and resources, lots of time and lots of resources.
They do, yeah, to work out all the bugs as people step by step work towards, something wonderful that works smoothly to benefit society, bit by bit, testing and retesting and innovating some more. So in 1930 is when the United States Plant Patent Act uh, came out. So it allowed breeders of plants to be able to participate in this patenting system. And in the mid 1800s, especially, and it intensified into the late 1800s, people were making controlled crosses with plants, coming up with new varieties. There was a lot of excitement as different species of plants, in particular roses, were shared across continents.
Mm-hmm.
Repeat blooming specimens became shared even more out of Asia into Europe, United States, and people crossing lots of different plants of different backgrounds to see what great advances could be made. So by 1930, a few to several decades after controlled pollinations and much more strategic efforts towards plant breeding began, there was enough of a impetus that led to the idea of patenting new plants. So the Plant Patent Act allowed for a breeder to have intellectual property of that unique genotype, that unique plant, as it's propagated through cuttings or grafting, so it's clonally propagated. Since then, there are other kinds of patents that help with seed propagated crops like wheat or soybeans. But in 1930, that Plant Patent Act first came out being applied to plants that are clonally propagated, including roses, different fruits, where through cuttings we'd get a duplicate that's genetically the same as the original plant to be able to have that consistency for the consumer. So in order for a plant to get patented, there are a few criteria that need to be met, and that includes that the plant arose in cultivation, so it wasn't just found in the wild, and that it can be clonally propagated through cuttings, grafting, and have the characteristics that set it apart be true to type. So it'd be predictable to have those key characteristics from plant to plant. And then in addition, that innovation can't be disclosed or shared for more than a year by the time the application goes in. So if they wait more than a year, then they lose the opportunity to patent their plant. The very first plant that got a U.S. plant patent in 1930 was the famous climbing rose, New Dawn. So roses have a very close connection with the whole plant patent system, not only for the very first plant that was ever patented in the United States, but also roses have more patents than any other species of plant within the plant patent system.
Isn't it just wonderful that it was a rose first?
Yeah, and such a great one that people still love and grow today.
Oh, yes, it is just stunning. It is just stunning. I was in Little Rock, Arkansas a few years ago, and it is a beautiful town, and lots of fences, lots of beautiful properties, and New Dawn roses everywhere. And just I happened to be there when they were in bloom. It was spectacular.
Wow.
So pretty. Yeah, it was special for sure. A special rose for sure. And there's lots of special stories. Now, you have a special story about how rose icon Frances Millon first got involved too.
Yeah, so it's been just inspirational over the years here, getting to know Alain Millon, his son, and recognize the fullness of that story. So in 1930, that Plant Patent Act went into effect, and then that spurred on a lot more breeding. So as different people recognize that that there could be an incentive to invest more in plant development, plant breeding, different rose nurseries began to develop their own exclusive varieties. And in order to get a patent, it doesn't necessarily mean that a new plant has to be better, but just different. And then the other criteria that we just shared. So a lot of different companies were involved in rose development, which was great for rose gardeners to have even more options available as the years went by. So Francis Millon, as a young man in his early 20s, he came to visit in the United States and visited the Conard Pyle Company, known probably more widely today as Star Roses and Plants. And Francis was inspired by the U.S. plant patent system, and of course that began the wonderful, very long relationship between Millon International, Millon Roses, and the Star Roses and Plants Company. And Francis, inspired by the U.S. plant patent system, as he went back to Europe, he was a key person that initiated the work and set the stage for what became known today as European plant breeder rights. So the European Union, the European system, has their own version of plant patents as plant breeder rights. And as the years have gone by, with different voices amongst the breeders there's slight differences in terms of how things are patented, how long patents last, but it's very similar. So these plant patent systems are unique to different geographical regions of the world. So, for instance, today for Mayan International, they'll seek European plant breeder rights on a new variety that they're releasing in Europe, and then as that same variety gets released in the United States, in order for it to have protection, it'll have to get a United States plant patent too, Australian plant breeder rights, in China, Japan, different parts of the world. So Francis Mayan set the stage and led the way with European plant breeder rights.
Such a beautiful story, and just knowing the timing, it's 1935 when he comes, and then he's going to go back home, and lots of things are going to change. Our world is going to change, but he did get that cross back across the pond that led to the peace rose.
Yeah, that's amazing. So
It's
when
just amazing.
he came home after that visit in 1935, and that's when he made the Pollination for Peace, and there's just a wonderful continuance of that story. So as he recognized that peace was a very special rose, the hybrid teas were kind of waning in popularity a little bit by that point, and peace, with its vigor, its beautiful flowers, it was a step above the hybrid teas of that time. And he shared peace, got it sent out to different collaborators, friends around the world. And as they lost communication during World War II, people recognized how special it was. And then it earned an All-America Rose Selection Award for 1945 in the United States, and then a U.S. plant patent in the United States really set the stage for those royalties for peace to be able to get shared, sent to the Mayan family eventually, and it helped the company rebuild after the war, and was just so instrumental during that difficult time that led and allowed Mayan International to be the strong, wonderful company that it remains today.
It's a beautiful story, and it's a story that's been made into a children's book, and I think the title is A Rose Called Peace. And there's so many great writings about it, but this children's book is a big, beautiful book about this rose. And it shows, that the rose fields were burned and just all of the things that happened, and then all of the beautiful things that it led to. So it's just a great, great story that we can all just participate in and be proud of. And just the naming of the rose Peace at such a time in our world is just so special.
Yeah. So, taking a step back a little bit into the 1930s. So after the Plant Patent Act came through, these different rose nurseries especially invested in innovation. So a number of them began rose breeding programs, and part of it was to have exclusive roses. Before that point, if somebody invested in breeding using some field space, time, greenhouse space, that wasn't necessarily going to be profitable in the moment as they invested in innovation. As somebody came up with a new rose and started selling it, there was nothing to prevent their competitor from down the road to get a plant of it and start propagating and selling it too. So with the Plant Patent Act, that allowed these nurseries to exclusively be the place to get some of these new roses, and they didn't necessarily have to license it to other people. And the market started to become flooded with new roses, and marketers for each of the different companies were sharing, this rose is the greatest, and you could only get it, of course, at our nursery. And that led to the beginning of All America Rose Selections. So different industry members recognized we needed a way to be able to identify the roses that are well above average across the whole nation as nurseries sold their roses across the country. So in 1938, a number of industry members banded together to create this national rose trialing program known as All-America Rose Selections. And then the first winning roses came out in 1940, 2 years after that, after the first trial period. So plant patents spurred on lots of innovation. And then also after that spurred on independent plant trials to be able to sort through all the amazing new plants, to test them more thoroughly, to help inform consumers across the nation in terms of what's the best of the best.
That is such a gift. And all of the trials that we have now, it's just such a gift to see that, to know that regionally it's been tested. It makes our decision so much easier. We can be carefree about our decision because someone else is doing all of this hard work of testing. And I just love that. I love that the programs that we have in place now, just working very hard, and they were giving us specific information about not only our region, but fragrance or disease resistance or water wise, they are drought resistant. I mean, these things are so wonderful for the home gardener to make their decisions.
Yeah, and it's a labor of love. So these trials, for the most part, many of them are run by volunteers. The modest entry fees don't cover the costs of doing all this work. So these independent trials, so University of California, Davis does low water trials. And of course, there's the American Rose Trials for Sustainability, Award of Excellence for Miniature Roses, American Garden Rose Selection Trials in the United States. So these nurseries and breeders, they're working in a particular location, and they don't necessarily have access to have their plants planted out all across the nation themselves. So they utilize these wonderful trials to help bring in that information. And then consumers, it helps us a lot because these trials give us information about those roses that we just can't see at the nursery as we look at that beautiful plant in front of us, knowing, are you drought tolerant? Are you disease resistant? They look beautiful at the moment. They just hop right in our carts. But these trials give that information to us to help us make the connection to find those roses that are most adapted to our gardens.
Oh, absolutely. I just love that. Now, how many plant trials do we have going on right now that you can think of?
There's trials beyond roses, but for roses, it's mainly for the national trials, the American Rose Trials for Sustainability, American Garden Rose Selections, and then the American Rose Society hosts the Award of Excellence for Miniature Roses. So those are the three national ones. And then besides that, there's the specialty trials for drought tolerance there at University California, Davis. Some industry partners, for instance, the Synergy Group in the Northeast part of the United States, they have that Handpicked for You sub-brand that they do. And they have some trials at their member nurseries there in the Northeast. But mainly these national trials are the strongest trials for us as gardeners, especially the arts trials, American Rose Trials for Sustainability, and AGRS, because then they award their awards on a regional basis. So you could recognize, what region do I live in? What are the roses that have won in my locality?
And that makes such a difference. And America is so vast. Here in Indiana is a lot different than in Wisconsin, and a lot different than Florida and California. I mean, it's just, It's not a one size fit all. So this is just very, very valuable to us. One of my favorite quotes about this kind of thing was Jacques Farrar of Star Roses and Plants, and he said that they had rose hell, and they like to think that they would send roses to hell, and we didn't have to. So they just put them out there to see what they could do, and they didn't get very much water and very little care. And so many of these programs have just brought us beautiful things to our garden, and we certainly are appreciative of that, the work. And as you said, much of this work is done by volunteers, so we certainly appreciate it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and so All America Rose Selection, as we know, disbanded in 2012. So unfortunately, with it being industry-led and a number of industry members going out of business with the downturn in the economy just before that, that allowed or led to All America Rose Selections being disbanded. But fortunately, the American Rose Trials for Sustainability, and I'm part of that, we're able to pull together enough resources and have people representing industry, university scientists, public garden specialists, American Rose Society members to have a broader foundation to these trials. So as one sector, a stakeholder might struggle a bit due to the economy or other reasons, hopefully we'll be able to keep these trials going. And so I'm really grateful that we're able to get ARTS off the ground and AGRS too.
Oh, yes, it's so valuable. So let's talk about how long a patent lasts. I know there's some confusion about that information. So how long do they last?
Yeah, great question. So originally they lasted 17 years. And then after they expired, anybody can clonally propagate that rose, cuttings, grafting. And then in 1998, the duration got extended to 20 years. So it's 20 years past the filing date. So somebody would write their patent, fill out the associated form, send it in. And when the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO, got that letter and got it in their system, that constituted the filing date. And then that started that clock ticking for 20 years.
Now, I'm just hearing a lot of buzz today about rose hybridizing and cuttings. People are very excited about that, and a lot of our young gardeners and people who've been gardening for years. I mean, it's just something, it's fun to do, it's fun to learn about. It's something new to people. But I'm hearing things that lead me to believe there's a lot of confusion about what a patent really means. Because I'm hearing people say things, well, like if I buy it, I can propagate for my own use or to give away. I just can't sell. Or I only propagate roses I get from the florist. Or, well, I can propagate roses and give away as long as I don't make any money on it. So is any of that true, or what is true? What are, could you shed some light on those different scenarios that we just commonly hear about this?
Yeah, that's a great question, Teresa. So ultimately, it boils down to the patent holder having control over the asexual or clonal propagation of that plant in recent years here now for 20 years. And so unauthorized propagation is prohibited. So unless we have permission from that patent holder, whatever we do to pretend that we authorized ourselves or somehow we deserve an exception, unfortunately, isn't true. So chances are that, if we do take some cuttings just for ourselves and share some, that ultimately that patent holder, likely won't feel like it's worth the great expense to hire lawyers and sue that person. But it just boils down to that, unless we have permission from that patent holder, we don't have permission. And, we're not legally propagating that plant. In the case of cut roses, that's a really great question. So it boils down to knowing what varieties that we do have and if there's an active U.S. plant patent. And if there isn't, if the rose was never patented, or if that patent has expired, then we have full access to be able to clonally asexually propagate that plant. Sales of that plant, maybe there's a nuance to it. So trademarks are different than plant patents. So plant patents cover the clonal propagation of that
Mm-hmm.
plant, getting copies of it through cuttings or grafting. But a trademark is the name by which that rose is sold. So for instance, now the original knockout rose, and if we look in the small print, the variety name is Rad Raz. The patent has expired, so people can propagate it, make cuttings of it, but they can't sell it under the name Knockout unless they have permission, of course, from Star Roses and Plants. So they can propagate it. They could call it Rad Raz. They could sell it under Rad Raz or come up with a new name that's different.
Mm.
But so there's patents for propagation and then trademarks that cover the name that the plant is sold under. If it's a common law or a registered trademark, if there's a name in big print, usually with either a TM or R with a circle near it, then we know that that's the trademark name. And then we could look in the small print for the variety name, which is usually in quotes, also called the cultivar name sometimes. And so there's that distinction that's sometimes a little tricky. Sometimes we see, for instance, some of David Austin's earlier roses where the patent has expired being sold under that variety name, like Osflush, for instance. So these nurseries are able to sell
Oh.
it, but they're not using the name Heritage, for instance, because that's trademark. So they're using that variety or cultivar name instead. So so that's something.
So good to know. So good to know. There was a little fine line there, and I wasn't quite sure. That's such good information. So that leads me to wonder. So if you're interested, this is something you want to do, and you want to, be a good steward of this. Where are you going to find the information about the patent?
That's a great question, and sometimes it's really tricky. So, for instance, those cut roses, they often don't even have the variety name. Recently, I've seen the variety name being presented a little bit more commonly. So, when you're buying a dozen roses, sometimes from some of the box stores, for instance, or some of those wholesale suppliers like Costco or Sam's Club, sometimes in that bundle of roses, you see the variety name, and you could look it up and eventually find that match online, who's the breeder, who's the distributor, and see if they mention a plant patent number.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, the best resource is going to the United States Patent and Trademark Office website. A variation of that is in Google. If we type Google Patents, a new search engine comes up, Google Patents. And then in that search engine, what you would type is not the trademark name, but that variety or cultivar name. So for instance, for knockout, you type in Rad Raz, and
Mm-hmm.
then you could get to that patent. It describes all the background of that plant, and then also gives us that patent number. So if you have a patent number, plant patent number, let's say 30,512, in that Google patent search engine, you could just type in PP for plant patent, no space, and then 30,512, and then up comes that patent. You'll be able to see when it was filed, add 20 years to that. You could, open up that patent as well, and then within that patent, it says how long that patent is good for. It has the final date, and then you'll know when it's safe to propagate it.
Mm. Such good information. Thank you so much, making that so easy for us. Now, you and I have been working on a project since 2019.
Yeah.
And it resulted in something very special. As everyone who knows me knows, one of my very favorite roses is Petite Pink. I have 8 of them. I've had more than that at many times. I've given many away. It's just this beautiful, beautiful rose filled with blooms, sweetheart blooms. I just love it. It's so healthy. And it's your rose. And in 2019, I was given a gift. A beautiful peach bloom, several of them actually, a couple of canes. And I immediately contacted you and said, David, something is going on. And I've had many people ask me, are you a hybridizer? And I said, no, I am not. I found something beautiful, and it's a sport. So tell our listeners what I found.
I'm so excited, Teresa, that you found it and you have your special rose. And it'll be so fun here. I'll let you share the variety name for it, because that's a wonderful connection, of course, to you and all that you do for us gardeners. So finding that mutation, that branch on your Petite Pink plant, and I'm so happy that you like Petite Pink. And there was a branch that started to grow with a mutation that led to a reduced amount of a pigment that leads to pink, anthocyanin. So then the warm background color came through to give blooms that were this gorgeous lighter peach color. And the plant, that branch, grew just like Petite Pink for healthiness and good branching, tidy, rounded plant habit. And so I was so excited when you shared the photograph of the sport. And then I encouraged how fun it would be to propagate cuttings from that unique branch and get whole plants that are all peach in terms of their blooms. And I remember that fall, it was late, and the roses began to shut down a bit by that point. And you shared a couple chunks or big branches of your plant, and it was no longer in bloom, and we weren't quite sure which branch had the peach component. So I was able to make cuttings of those 2 chunks of branches, and so fortunate that one of them housed that peach sport. So we're able to have whole plants that just produce peach blooms, and then propagate more from that. And then you were able to enter it into the Award of Excellence trials through the American Rose Society and the No Spray Division, get enough plants for that. And it won. So it's a winner for this next year. So excited for you. And then, of course, reach out to Matt Douglas there at High Country Roses, and he's the first person to be able to make it available for sale. And I'm helping propagate more plants for you to get to other nurseries and distributors to see if they'd like to pick it up too. So very grateful for that.
It is such a beautiful plant. If you like Petite Pink, you're going to love Petite Peach as well. It's the same. It's the same bloom type. I go back and look at that picture of the 2. Before I sent to you, I had taken cuttings and of the pink. It's all in the same shrub, but the pink and the peach together, and they were so similar in shape and form and all of that, but so different in color. And I can attest to how this just takes time. You start this process and you go down this road, but you have to see if the color holds and if the plant is stable and if it propagates well. And then the testing programs take years. So this is not, just something that just happens and it's easy breezy. There's a lot to learn. And I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't had you. I probably wouldn't be, I wouldn't have Petite Peach to sell to people. It's so beautiful. And one of the things that I've been hearing now, it's been in people's gardens long enough that I'm getting reports back and they just love it. And it's just so rewarding. But it does take time, and it could require a lawyer. I mean, there's just lots of things that people have to think about when you start down this road to bring something to market. So we didn't really talk about royalties and that kind of thing. And I think people probably think that royalties are much more than they actually are for the work that you put into things. But talk a little bit about the royalty, and then we'll go on and talk a little bit more about Petite Peach.
Awesome. So, so the royalty, typically with nurseries that I have some roses through and other plants such as Bailey Nursery, Star Roses and Plants, Plants Nouveau, Proven Winners. Typically, the royalty that goes to the breeder boils down to about 1% of the retail cost. So, so Uncle Sam with taxes, gets more than the breeder does. So for instance, for a $5 annual that you buy in a 4-inch pot, the breeder typically gets 5 cents. For a $25 rose, it's a quarter. For a $100 tree, it's about $1 that ultimately the breeder gets. So as part of that royalty, a lot of these nurseries, and this will be a good time to bring in the component of branding. They have what they ultimately charge as their royalty and marketing fee. So then they'll put into that fee also more cents to help cover their marketing costs. So for instance, a typical royalty and marketing fee that a nursery would charge as they sell, let's say, a rooted cutting to move on to a finishing nursery, might be about $1.50. It depends on the kind of plant. I'm thinking about shrubs here, or roses. So maybe for roses, anywhere between 75 cents and to $1.50 in general. So ultimately, the breeder gets what we just talked about, but then beyond that, the introduction nursery takes a cut, and then they also use some of that too to help pay for ads in magazines, social media, their marketing professionals that work at the company to get the message out. So in recent years, branding has become such a key component of the horticulture industry and how plants get to us. The first really big plant that was an international success story in terms of branding applied to plants was flower carpet pink. So in the mid 1990s, Anthony Teslar from Australia connected with Noack, a breeder in Germany that bred flower carpet pink, and had this idea of using branding approaches that were used for things like toothpaste and facial tissues and soda pop with plants. So instead of the old-fashioned approach where maybe us as breeders, people finding sports of plants, find something cool, and we'll tap on the shoulder of our regional nursery supplier like Bailey Nurseries, for instance, or Monrovia, and say, would you have an interest in this plant? And then they'll look at, oh, maybe, and then they'll propagate a little bit, and then they'll tap on the shoulders of their retail customers, so the garden centers that ultimately buy from them to sell to the general public. Oh, do you have an interest in this? And then if they say yes, then eventually then those people tap on the shoulders of consumers. So lots of opportunity for things to be real slow and the pipeline to get bottlenecked. So instead, what did they do? They knew that they had a great rose. They tested it across different climates. And then they jumped over all those middle people and they began putting ads out there in national magazines, being on Good Morning America, creating this buzz. And then as they did so, they shared that they were doing this with some nurseries, and they promised these nurseries, okay, you'll be the exclusive supplier for this part of the country. We're going to do all this marketing. You want to be on board? Okay, people have to come to you. And then the consumers will go to their local garden centers and say, do you have this rose that comes in this pink pot, flower carpet pink? And if they didn't know it, they're going to learn about it soon. And they knew consumers had money burning a hole through their pocket and they wanted to buy it. And then that just really jump started that whole supply chain. So today we have many different brands. So we have first editions, Easy Elegance roses, proven winners, garden debut, that handpicked for you collection, Bloomin' Easy. We have so many different brands now in the marketplace, and these brands want to have exclusive plants. So you're only going to find that unique, wonderful, new, innovative plant through them. So a plant patent is going to allow for limitation of propagation. So if they have the license or given the permission from the breeder to be the only outlet to propagate that plant, then that'll give them the confidence then to invest the money for all that major marketing. So it's going to cost a whole lot more for that marketing than the price of a plant patent. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But patents and branding go hand in hand because it gives those brands the exclusive for that plant for that 20-year period. And then, of course, they link in a trademark with it as well. So all these different brands are actually benefiting consumers because these different brands want to have their own versions or varieties of our beloved favorite plants, roses, hydrangeas. So it brings a lot of diversity to us because they all have their unique varieties. And then these national plant trialing programs will hopefully help us sort through what sometimes feels like Me Too varieties. Everybody wants to have a white hydrangea, a red rose, or this or that, but whose is the best?
Yeah, it's such a good process, but it is a timely and a costly process. And so the protection of those who are going through this is just responsible. It's just the responsible thing to do. If someone's gone to the trouble and they have the trademark or they have the plant patent, that we want to honor that for sure. It just, it's just the right thing to do.
Let me share a little bit, Teresa, about how much a plant patent costs and what goes into it. So as you're very familiar with, as we walked through the process with Petite Peach, it was fun being a cheerleader and by your side through the process. There's a number of forms that get filled out in terms of the background of the plant and the variety name that you choose for it, where you found it. And then as part of it, there's a specification where in a very detailed way, we describe the botanical features of that plant, what makes it separate or different from the other roses, what color is it, how large are the plant parts, what's unique about, for instance, the branching pattern and other aspects of the shape of the petals and all that. So we fill out those details, and when we do send it to the USPTO, there's a fee that goes along with it, an application fee. So after they receive that application and they review it, which could take up to a year. Recently, it's been a little quicker, but sometimes a little more than a year. Then they'll get back to us with any edits that they need, and then there'll be a second fee, the issue fee. Altogether, without any discounts, the overall fees for the government is about $2,200. And then they have a special incentive. So if you make less than 3 times the median household income, then you can qualify for a small entity, and that's where I'm qualifying these days. And so it costs about half that at about $1,200. And then if you qualify for small entity plus have less than 5 patents to date, which you qualified for, then you get it as a micro entity, which is about half of the small entity, so closer to about $500 to $600. So there's this tiered system based on how many patents you have and how wealthy you are as an individual or a company. So if a person doesn't want to pursue writing the patent themselves, it's a big learning curve to get all that botanical information and how to do it. Actually, Harvey Davidson is the one that encouraged me to have the courage to apply for my own plant patents. He passed away unfortunately, but he was in California, and he's known for the Smooth Touch series of thornless roses. And he was an amazing character and just devoted himself to these wonderful hybrid teas, floribundas, that were thornless. And so he encouraged me to begin the process. So either the plant breeder or a licensed patent attorney can submit the information to the USPTO.
There's so many details, but then you get to the good stuff and you see your plants and gardens. And in my case, last June, I found out that Petite Peach was the winner of the American Rose Society Award of Excellence and in the no spray division. So my goodness, it was like, my child was on stage and there was pictures and, photographers, and it was so fun. So this has been such a fun ride for me. It's truly a gift from my garden and a gift of your friendship to help me work through all of this. And now we're hearing about how well it's doing in people's gardens. So I just love that. I just want everyone to have one. And if you do want one, just contact High Country Roses. They'll have them in the spring. They sold out this fall, which was wonderful. So, and if you're growing it, let me know how it's doing. I would love to hear from you. So such a great, fun project, but there are some details to work through and lots of things that you need to do and know. And the patent office is there to help you once you get the process started too. But you have to begin to think patent. And so I had moments where I was doing my patent work so I could I had to take myself back to school to learn patentese, but it's great fun, a beautiful gift from the garden.
Yeah, one thing that inspires me for every plant that is ready for a patent and to work through the writing of it is how much a person learns. I know I learn a ton every time as I look extra close to document the story of the plant, and I feel as a plant breeder here, eventually I'm very grateful for every plant that a nursery does want to introduce. It doesn't make sense to go through a plant patent if you don't have a supply chain or anybody to introduce it. Is how much I learn about and appreciate that plant. So I feel like the plant patents that we write ourselves as people well connected with the plants versus paying a patent attorney, and they deserve their income for sure. Pay them a few $1,000s at least for profit for them too. Is what a great advocate that we are for our plants, and we'll tell that story very completely as we look very close and document the fine details well.
And stories, stories of the garden, stories of the plants. These are the things that just keep us going. We love them.
Yeah. Aww.
Well, I've bent your ear today, but before I let you go, I know that all the rose lovers out there would appreciate hearing an update on your work in black spot research.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I'm just thrilled to be at the point where we're at right now. It's a slow process. As the listeners know, if anybody has heard us talk about black spot research on previous programs, as we find genes that lead to resistance to certain races or form of the fungus that leads to black spot, it's a slow, tedious process. And this winter, we're finally at the point of being able to test some what are called markers, little snippets of DNA that are really tightly close to or actually within these genes. So we're going to confirm, validate these little snippets of DNA that could be tested for by breeders. They could send stuff to us or work with a independent lab. So we'll share the parameters that are needed, the primers and such, to easily test if a rose has a particular black spot resistance gene. It's kind of like when we may have gotten tested for COVID with a PCR test. So we're at the point here of finding just the right segment of DNA and confirming that the best little snippet of DNA close to the gene, that we can eventually share that information with the world so they could test their roses and know which roses have which black spot resistance genes. So then they could ultimately cross roses that have different forms of resistance to find those babies that combine multiple forms to hopefully lead to new varieties that have even greater resistance.
Oh, how wonderful. Bravo, David. Well done. We appreciate all the time that you spend on this. It's going to benefit all of us for sure. Black spot is just something we just would love to eliminate.
Yeah.
We would. So thank you so much. And David, whoa, you have taught us so much today. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all that you do for the world of roses. And thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I love listening to your show. And so hopefully this inspires the audience members, those listening, to appreciate what goes in behind the scenes for these plant patents and how it helps spur on continued innovation to lead to even more beautiful roses for our gardens.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And friends, thanks for joining us today. Now, this will be our final Rose Chat of 2023. Can you believe it? And in looking over the list, I see that we've chatted about rose history, rose culture, new roses, rose care, rose trials, hybridizing, rose trends, and so much more. It's been a fun and educational year for me, for sure. And if you've missed any of those podcasts, they're easy to find. Just go to rosechatpodcast.com on your mobile device or your laptop or your desktop. And we already have a great lineup for 2024, so stay tuned. Until next time, have a wonderful holiday season.
You've been listening to the Rose Chat podcast with Chris VanCleave and Teresa Byington, expert rose gardeners who want to help you achieve the rose garden of your dreams. Don't miss an episode. Listen anytime on our website at rosechatpodcast.com or listen on the go via the Rose Chat app on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. Share this podcast with your social networks and join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by using the hashtag RoseChat. Join us next time for another edition of the Rose Chat podcast. The Rose Chat podcast is a production of the Rose Chat Media Group, Birmingham, Alabama.